All right, so when we look at this picture, we see the timeline of mankind's inventions. And when you look at this, don't you think the ingenuity of mankind is unparalleled? Because I certainly think so. The ingenuity of mankind is indeed unparalleled. Be it awe-inspiring civilizations, the discovery of gravity, or setting foot on distant planets, we humans have constantly innovated and expanded our knowledge of the physical realms and farther beyond. Just in the last decade, we have managed to sequence our first ancient human genome and have also managed to edit genes within a span of a few hours. And it's thanks to this advancement in science that we are also able to gather here today. Just 2 years ago, none of this would have been possible. And I'd like to thank all things science for this, such as respirators, hand sanitizers, vaccines. Another medical wonder that has been our saving grace for decades are antibiotics. Now, please raise your hand up if any of these pills look familiar to you. And please continue to keep your hands up if you've ever used one or been prescribed one by your doctor. All right, I can see the majority of us here today have used antibiotics or been prescribed one by their doctor at least once in their lives. And some of us here might have even shared antibiotics with someone else without considering whether the other person had a bacterial or viral infection. Or you might have even bought antibiotics over the counter without a doctor's prescription. And it's due to this fact that there are rise in strains of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. What I mean by this is that bacteria now have the ability to defeat the drugs that can kill them. This is known as antibiotic resistance and can be found in other types of medication too. Microbes like viruses and fungi are also becoming resistant to the drugs that are designed to defeat them. And all of these effects as a whole are known as antimicrobial resistance, or AMR for short. Well, the very first case of AMR was documented shortly after the discovery of penicillin. To those who need a quick rundown, penicillin is the first natural antibiotic discovered by Alexander Fleming in 1928. Well, at that time, penicillin was thought to be a revolutionary drug. After all, in the 1920s, when diseases like cholera and diphtheria would wipe out thousands of people, and small wounds would lead to life-threatening injuries, it was no wonder that a drug that could defeat such diseases would gain immense popularity. When penicillin was first distributed in US pharmacies in 1945, it was used to treat almost every disease in existence. Doctors would prescribe it to treat streptococcal meningitis, pneumonia, gonorrhea, among many other diseases. And eventually, this over-reliance on penicillin led to the rise of the very first strains of penicillin-resistant bacteria in 1947, just 2 years after the commercial release of penicillin. And this resistance of bacteria towards antibiotics didn't stop with just penicillin. In recent years, resistance towards vancomycin, which is a last resort antibiotic used to treat serious multi-drug resistant infections, has also emerged. Other last resort antibiotics, such as carbapenem, no longer work against certain strains. In order for us to tackle AMR, we need to understand what causes it in the first place. According to WHO, the overuse and misuse of antibiotics are the main drivers in this rise of antibiotic-resistant pathogens. This is because when we use antibiotics, the bacteria have a chance of remaining, and because they don't die, and thereby multiplying and passing along this resistance to other pathogens. Thus, the more we use antibiotics, the higher the chances of antibiotic-resistant strains forming. And this is just one reason for why AMR occurs. Another reason is due to poor hygiene, poor prevention and control, since they increase the chances of pathogen spreading and thus the need to use antibiotics. Now, you might be wondering, Wouldn't it be possible to just use another antibiotic, perhaps invent a new one? Well, the thing is that the answer is not quite simple. Even if we do use a new antibiotic, that new drug inevitably will complete its lifespan and we will be back to square one. This circle of invention and obsolescence will continue until we fully manage to eradicate AMR. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself when all we have seen in recent years is the gradual rise in death rates caused by AMR. A worldwide analysis published on The Lancet in 2019 showed that 1.27 million people died as a direct result of AMR, and 4.95 million died due to associations by AMR. If you compare the statistics to HIV, where the total number of deaths is nearly over 800,000 in 2019, according to UNAIDS statistics, you will see there is a significant gap of 400,000 between deaths caused by AMR and deaths caused by HIV. 400,000. This just goes to show that AMR is now becoming one of the leading threats to humanity. In fact, a study commissioned by the UK government in 2014 predicts that by 2050, 10 million people will die per year as a direct result of AMR. I repeat, 10 million. To compare this with COVID-19, where the total number of deaths is 6.61 million, you will see just how dire the situation we are in currently. 6.61 million within a span of 3 years compared to 10 million per year. This is an incoming pandemic that we are not in the slightest bit prepared to withstand. Why do I say this? Because the numbers don't lie. As shown in this diagram, since the late 80s, no new classes of antibiotics has been discovered. This means that we are researching on and developing antibiotics from the same classes of antibiotics. And because bacteria that is resistant to a particular antibiotic have the ability to develop resistance to similar antibiotics, the fact that we have an over 30-year drought of new novel classes of antibiotics is quite concerning for our survival. So what can we do in order to stop and hinder the spread of AMR? Because let's be real, evolution is a real thing. We will never be able to completely eradicate AMR. We can, however, take steps in order to slow down its spread. And the easiest way, and perhaps the most doable, is through awareness. And although World Antimicrobial Awareness Week ended 2 days ago, we can still aid in this mission. So let us speak amongst ourselves, amongst our friends, family, peers, colleagues, and even on social media by using the hashtag antimicrobial awareness and resistance. And let us educate ourselves further about AMR. There are tons of blogs, posts, and videos that my 12-minute TED Talk will not be able to encompass information into. And after we equip ourselves with more knowledge, let us advocate for countries to set up and intensify laws and regulations over the usage and purchase of antibiotics. And let us also advocate for more awareness campaigns on a national and even onto a global scale. And let us also urge pharmaceutical companies to have more development and investment on new antibiotics. Apart from the actions of pharmaceutical companies and governments, the actions of each individual also matter. Some simple ways to hinder the spread of AMR is to practice good hygiene, not take antibiotics without proper medical oversight, complete taking a round of antibiotics, and not take antibiotics if it's not a serious infection. And so the next time that all of you think of considering taking antibiotics, I want you to deliberate over it, to consider whether you should actually take it, and consider the consequences of your actions. Because let's be honest, we can't see if bacteria will become resistant with our naked eyes. We only face the effects once it's too late. So if we continue to misuse antibiotics as we do now, AMR can become a raging pandemic that we will never be able to overcome. Thank you.